Idioms in the Bible Explained, a key to the Holy Scriptures by George M.Lamsa. And he dedicated this particular volume to his very dear friend at the time, the Reverend Rocco Errico. This is the guy that stated, when you see the verse in your modern Americanized English Bible versions, Jesus will be seen on the clouds, he says, well, in the original language, be it Aramaic or Syriac, that he's talking about, it doesn't mean literally that he'll be seen coming on the clouds. What it means in that Eastern mindset, through those idioms, expressions, is that he'll be seen amongst the people, by the people, say in Israel. So he dedicated that volume to this Reverend Rocco Errico, who's a translator of the Syriac, Peshitta, etc., in appreciation for his help to do this particular volume, this particular book. Contents page. Introduction. All languages of the world, both ancient and modern, have idioms. It's a way to express, the way they express themselves through that language. Metaphors and mannerisms of speech. This style of speech is called colloquialism, and that's what America is well known for. They are a colloquial country, whereas those of the British Empire that were colonized are called colonial. They're a colony, so they speak colonial English, or British, right? It's not the Queen's English, it's just colonial English. An idiom is a saying that foreigners cannot understand without being trained. It is often taken literally and therefore misunderstood. This is because when we use an idiom, we say one thing, but we mean another. For example, in Aramaic, they say, if your hand offends you, cut it off. Which means, if you have a habit of stealing, cut it off, or cut it out. It doesn't mean literally, go get a saw, or chase or cut your hand off, your arm off. An English idiom, he is in a pickle, really means he is in trouble. Therefore, idioms and colloquialisms are not to be taken literally. A student must know their true meaning in order to translate them accurately into another language. So we are quite well versed in that, because we communicate with Syrians from Syria here in our country. We've come across, and also with an Aramaic speaking translator. He knows many dialects from Mesopotamia, Syria. So that's why we came to understand this Aramaic, or rather Eastern mindset, the way they were thinking. So when you look at your modern Bible versions, you think, oh yeah, I know what that means. You don't. And people come at us and say that sort of stuff. Oh, you a deceiver, etc., etc. Well, they're actually wrong, because it's in a different mindset, those idioms. So it's not what we in the Western world with our mindset think it is. It's something completely different, and that's what we're bringing to people. But they tend to come at us and say, oh, it's wrong, it's this, you're a deceiver, you're of Satan, all this sort of baloney, right? Because they don't understand that, even though we try to explain it to them. Idioms, metaphors and figures of speech constitute a great barrier in mastering a foreign language. Translators from one language into another have always been cognizant of these difficulties, so they understand that there's a difference between the Eastern and the Western mindset, and so forth. This is one reason why the Bible is misunderstood and has been subjected to revision throughout the centuries. Look inside your modern Bible versions. It'll say this was revised at Palo Heights or something like that in 1966, 67, whatever, and then again in 76. So those are revised, been done over again. Looked at, examined, and then revised. So you've got this new version. Okay? It's because languages evolve over time, and they're trying to make an easier version so you understand it better. Who the heck understands King James, right? When you read the old 1611 King James, it's got thou art, thee for, thy for, thereout. Where the wherefore art thou, all that sort of stuff. Who wants to read that? It's baffling, it's confusing. So that's why they brought out the New King James Version in your more modern, possibly Americanized English. So this is one reason why the Bible is misunderstood and has been subjected to revision throughout the centuries. The 16th century translators of the Holy Bible did not understand the idioms of the languages from which they translated. That's why in their revisions they say, well, we're not too sure what this means. We think it means. Okay, so there indicates, well, they don't really know what it means. They're unsure. It could mean this, and it could mean that, and possibly this and that. Therefore, they translated idioms literally, and their true meanings were lost. So, somewhere along the way, they may have said, yeah, okay, if you have that problem, that sin, get a sword, cut your arm off. Because that's literally what it says, when it doesn't, right? It's just an example. Therefore, they translated idioms literally, and their true meanings were lost. This is not all. They were also unfamiliar with the Eastern customs and manners which constitute the background of the Bible. All the authors of the Bible were born and reared in the East, originally. Not Greeks, because they're of the West. Okay. And they were reared in the East. And they spoke the Semitic languages of Aramaic and Hebrew, originally. So all those out there say, oh, no, originally it was a Greek. It was all written in Greek. God spoke Greek, Jesus spoke Greek, Moses spoke Greek. Baloney. Invariably, people throughout the world think and express themselves differently. Moreover, their customs and manners are varied. Nevertheless, what they say in their own language is well understood by their own people. But when translated into an alien or foreign tongue, many words and phrases lose their meanings completely and others are obscured. These varied differences in speech cannot be learned by the means of textbooks or dictionaries. One has to live with foreign people or alien people, okay, these Easterners, etc., in order to understand their idioms and mannerisms of speech. And he goes on to write that years ago, prior to this book being written, etc., he read in a newspaper that a US Navy yard was firing 2,500 workers because they had no jobs for them. His little pocket dictionary stated fire. He's looking at the definition. To shoot, to set on fire. This idiom horrified him whenever he came across it. He also did not understand the use of the word fresh, such as fresh food, and a fresh man. The word fair was confusing too, such as a fair judge and a fair woman. So he thought with these English definitions, fire actually meant that these bosses, because they had no jobs, so these people go out and shoot them or set them on fire. Today, thousands of foreign students in our colleges and universities are puzzled just as he was when they came across some of the American idioms and colloquialisms with so many meanings. For example, he has been an underdog. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He is in a jam. He is in hot water. To give the bride a shower. In the East, brides are bathed before the nuptials. He thought the Americans had the same custom as in the Holy Land. When a lady invited him to her apartment and said, "We will have a shower," he said, "No thanks, I'll always take my bath in the morning." There are about 500 words in the English language which have more than 5,000 meanings. Now, if English, which is a comparatively modern language, has so many idioms and words with different meanings, then we must realize that ancient languages have more idioms than English and are much more difficult to understand. As an example, a man said to Jesus, let me bury my father. Or let me first bury my father. As an example, okay, that's the example. This expression means let me first take care of my father until he dies. But foreign scholars took it for granted that this man's father was dead and that Jesus was not interested in his burial. Such an ancient idiom is still used in Eastern languages every day and is easily understood even by the common and illiterate people there. Also in Philemon 1:8 we read that Paul told Philemon, one of his converts, to receive back his servant who had stolen some money from him and had run away. Paul wrote to him, "Whatever he owes you, put it on my account," which in Aramaic means forget it, or as Americans say in English, put it on the cuff. Western commentators have portrayed Philemon as the world's first banker from which Paul borrowed money. So when he says, put it on my account, it's like the example in the Bible, like if somebody owes you money, forget about it. Okay? But if you owe them money, pay it back as soon as you can. Yeah? So whoever owes you debts, forgive your debtor, etc. This idiom is still used daily in several languages in the Middle East. Paul tells Philemon that he owes him a great deal because he had converted him to Christ. As this author said earlier, students of a foreign language take every word exactly as written. They do not know which is an idiom and which is not an idiom. That's why we, the Ministry of the Truth, show you the footnotes of the translator. He's put idioms, explanation of the idioms underneath every book, every chapter. Okay, so that's why we refer to those. A man born with a silver spoon in his mouth would be taken literally by Easterners to mean being born miraculously. The author of this particular book, M.Lamsa, while translating the Holy Scriptures from the ancient Aramaic language into English, that would be the Syriac, became cognizant of the importance of the idioms and metaphors of the Bible. Therefore, he compiled nearly 1,000 idioms from the Scriptures to facilitate the reading and understanding of the Holy Bible. So basically to help you understand what was really being said and what was really being meant. It must be remembered that just as Shakespeare, Milton and Browning wrote for the English-speaking people, so Moses, the prophets and the apostles wrote to their own people. They used their own idioms and metaphors which were well understood and still are understood in the original context. And he writes, M.Lamsa writes here, "I am sure this volume will be of great assistance to readers of the Holy Bible, regardless of their religious affiliation." It doesn't matter if you're a Presbyterian, Lutheran, Wesleyan, Roman Catholic, whatever. The idioms translated in this book will help to elucidate hundreds of obscure and obtuse passages and make the Word of God so plain that even simple people will understand it. Yeah, something like, let's say, we're not going to rub it into simple-minded people or whatever, but let's say a 5-year-old, okay, with enough brains he can read, he can understand it. That's how easy it would be. Well, people who aren't that well educated, right? God commanded the prophets to write in a plain language so that the unlearned people might understand his word. Because not everybody there was educated, highly educated, right? Sometimes, most times it was a privilege, i.e. Paul being a Roman citizen. You had to be privileged. Deuteronomy 27:8, "And you shall write upon the stones all the words of this law very plainly." Eastern text by Lamsa. Hebrews 2:2, "And the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision and make it plain upon tablets, that he who reads it may understand it clearly." Eastern text by Lamsa again. The author of this book, Lamsa, and the translator of the Holy Bible from Aramaic, or Lamsa again, right? From Aramaic and English, same person, was born and reared in a region in the Near East which had escaped modernization, a region where the customs, manners and idioms of the ancient Aramaic language, or Syriac, are still miraculously preserved to the present day. The language did not change because the area remained remote and isolated until World War II. So whatever manuscripts they had, the Syriac or the Aramaic, they didn't need to translate it into English because it was explicitly for their people who spoke the language, who could understand it if they heard it or they read it. Aramaic was the lingua franca. It's like a trendy language at the time, right? Of what is known as the Fertile Crescent, from time immemorial until the 13th century, when Aramaic was replaced by a sister tongue, Arabic. Okay, you got to look at the different languages. Okay, the Aramaic, the Hebrew, the Syriac, etc. Supposedly, the grandparent language was Nabatean. This is just what we found. We're not saying it's 100% or 120% fact or true. Okay, that there's the Nabatean, maybe the Damu, and then you add the Aramaic, the Syriac, the Hebrew, and then you had the child language, which was Arabic. This fact is well known. So the Aramaic and the Hebrew and the Syriac were the parent languages. This Arabic was the child language. Lamsa chose the King James text from which to pick the idioms quoted in this book, unless otherwise indicated, because the King James text is the most widely used Bible translation in the English-speaking world. Moreover, the King James translators were more faithful to the text from which they translated into English, making fewer additions and omissions than later English version translators and revisers. They translated many Eastern idioms and metaphors literally, not knowing their true meaning. For instance, you shall handle snakes. They did not know that the word snake refers to an enemy, not a literal snake or poisonous snake, a cobra or anything like that. Beware of dogs was not understood to be beware of gossipers in Semitic languages. Most of the idioms in this particular book have been explained in his translation of the Bible from the Aramaic and the commentaries thereon. He believed the following idiom translations within facilitate the reading of the Bible, whether it be the King James or other English versions. Since millions of people have yet to become acquainted with his translation and his commentaries, this volume, this particular book, would be helpful to them. He's grateful to Robert James Heinekamp, a student of his, for help in compiling these idioms. And he gives a blessing for those who search for his truth, the truth of God, the Christ, etc., which endures forever, and those who use this little volume as a key to elucidate many of the difficulties in the book of books, or the Bible. So forget, it's a compilation, because in the Greek it's biblios, which means a book of books, basically, or a compilation of books, right? Okay, this is the book of Genesis, and here it says, let there be light, Genesis 1:3, which means, because it uses idioms, let there be enlightenment, let there be understanding. So we can also have a look at Genesis 1 verse 3 from the original ancient Tab Ashut, Nishana Sapraya, the Aramaic. You can look at 1:3. Which says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. There's a footnote indicated here, and it's referring to the book of John 1 verse 3. John chapter 1 verse 3, and John 1:4. Through him there was life. It's talking about the Son of God, the Christ, because he breathed into Adam, to his nostrils, and he went from an inanimate soul to a animate soul, or a living soul. So that breath that you have is of Christ. So the Christ is actually in you. Even if you deny that he doesn't exist, he's a myth, all that sort of stuff. See, it's the same as the claim that there's in the DNA is written in the name of God, and so forth. Okay, so it depends on two different translators. Okay, one is Victor N. Alexander from Mesopotamia, Syria, who says he's comparing it to John 1, 3, 4. But they'd probably agree, okay, being Easterners with that same mindset. You go, yeah, basically, yeah. Darkness, Genesis 1:4, ignorance, lack of enlightenment and understanding. And God saw that the light was beautiful, and God chose light over darkness. So, thinking that this translator Victor Alexander is trying to explain it from the Eastern to the Western mindset, so you fully get it, right? but then he puts the footnote underneath. Okay, all related to the book of John. And it's talking about the Son of God, because here it has Brita or Genesis 1. It says 1, as the beginning the Son of God creates heavens and the earth. Okay, so he's given the authority, that power to do that. But it might be a triune Godhead act. Okay, the three of them, the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit, working as one, or in union, or unison, unity, to create all on the planet forward, as they did with the planet backwards, the galaxies, planets, etc., etc. Okay, but according to this, the earth was made for him, it was made by him, and the darkness was over the face of infinite space. So there may have been nothing from the planet back. No planets, nothing. Okay, prior to that, just darkness, complete, infinite, unendless space, darkness, right? No time as such. Okay, then until they decided to create everything from the planet forward. That's what it could be meaning. Yeah? Then all the galaxies, etc., the planets, etc., were made, and then the Earth, the planet was made, and there was nothing on it, no form, it was void, and darkness was over the face of infinite space. Okay, as we mentioned way back. Okay, these things started to become, and then they evolved. They went through the different cycles, and so forth. Prior to everything being made, land coming up, vegetation being made, men, women being made, etc. Eden, Genesis 2:8, a delightful place, a temporal life. Garden, Genesis 2:8, metaphorically a wife, a family. Tree of life in the midst of the garden, Genesis 2:9. Sex, posterity, progeny. It's probably descendants it's talking about, right? Progenitors. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Genesis 2:9. Moral law, the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life, Genesis 2:9. Eternal life. The tree of good and evil, Genesis 2:17. Metaphorically, don't take it literally, right? Metaphorically, sexual relationship. Good, Genesis 2:17, anything perfect. So you could say, what was that, Genesis 2:9? Okay, we're not saying this is exactly it, 100%. We're just saying this could be where these two are not allowed to breed yet, have intercourse yet and breed, have children, descendants, until God allowed it, put them together and then allowed it. It's very similar to your Sumerian tablet stories. Okay, they weren't really allowed to breed, get together and have children, etc., unless those particular gods gave permission. So when they did that, they went against them and really upset those particular gods. It could be the same sort of scenario. It could be. I'm not saying it definitely is. Okay, was that 2:9? Have a look at that again. Okay, it was 2:17. And of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you may not eat, because on the day you eat of it, you will die of death. So there it could be saying idiomatically or metaphorically that you can't indulge in this certain fruit, this thing that produces, brings something forth, right? Descendants, children, etc. Because on the day you eat of it, you'll die of death, that spiritual death. Because you basically, you could say also that you did get permission, you didn't have permission to procreate, and you did it, so you could regard that in this particular example as a transgression. And again, it's only an example. We're not saying that's what it actually says. We're saying it could be, in the Aramaic, the Eastern mindset, be pointing at that metaphorically, okay, or intentionally, or it could be something that we don't realise that's what it's actually meaning. Okay. Good. Genesis 2:17. Anything perfect. Evil, Genesis 2:17, anything imperfect, contrary to good or immature. Naked, Genesis 2:25, they're exposed, they're ashamed. Because of that, man leaves his father, etc., etc. And they were both naked, Adam and his wife were not embarrassed. Because, okay, it could be metaphorical. Okay, they got no clothes on, they're embarrassed, they look at each other, ooh, embarrassed, right? You become conscious that they're naked, they've got no clothes, they're walking around prior to that, naked, and they weren't embarrassed or aware of it, right, or ashamed or anything like that. That follows with it. Okay, but then when they sinned, they suddenly realised, because they got a conscience. Oh, damn! I've got no clothes on, and we were all embarrassed. But it could also mean that they lost that thing they had, to be able to dwell in the presence of God. Something they felt like they'd lost something, and then they realised what it was because they had a conscience, and they thought, oh damn. Oh no, we're ashamed, etc., etc. So it could be two different meanings to that in the Eastern language, Eastern mindset. And you have serpent, Genesis 3:1, an enemy, a deception. Thorns and thistles, Genesis 3:18, grievances and difficulties that come up in life. Like you're doing really well, that's the fruit, etc. The produce is an example, right? And then life kicks you in the butt, right? Life has a way of doing that. Okay, then up comes these thorns and thistles, which, choke that great life you're having. All these problems and stuff like that. Okay? You think, well, what happened? I was having such a great life. It suddenly changed. We sort of headed down the toilet, right? That sort of thing. What happened? What went wrong? Sent forth from the garden, Genesis 3:23. A loss of harmony, a lost paradise. So they basically had this bliss, etc. 1 minute, and next minute they suddenly lost it. Yeah, it was bliss, it was paradise, it was great. Then suddenly something went wrong, and it turned to crap. Right? They didn't have that harmony anymore. God took him away. Genesis 5:24. He died painlessly. He had a heart attack. Let's have a look at that one. Genesis 5. Okay, it's 4. It's Exodus. Okay, we'll go back to Genesis. Genesis 4. Okay, it's no 5 there. Okay, we haven't got that part. Okay. Sons of God, Genesis 6:2. Good men. Sons of God. This is what it means here. Good men, the descendants of Seth. There's nothing to do with the fallen angels or anything like that. Descendants of Seth. Sons of God, because they began to call on the name of God. So that was like a holy line to start off with. And then they saw the daughters of men who were not God connected, they were ungodly or godless, saw their daughters, so they chose anyone they wanted. That's what it means there. It doesn't mean Lucifer and his 13 angels fell down and were dwelling amongst them and had genitalia and all that sort of stuff. And God says, my spirit shall not dwell in man forever. Genesis 6:3. I have become weary and impatient, and there's supposedly a scribal note attached to that. The Lord was sorry that he had made men, or man. Genesis 6:6. A scribal note, see Old Testament light, M.Lamsa, one of his books, right? God, I set my bow in the clouds, Genesis 9:13. I set the rainbow in the sky. I have lifted up my hands, Genesis 14:22. I am taking a solemn oath. Okay, and so forth. And there's a lot more here for Genesis. Look at this. Spilling seed on the ground, Genesis 38:9. Spilling semen on the ground, an ancient practice of birth control. Okay. So if they indulged, they probably thought, well, okay, I will be able to take that action but not produce children from it. Yeah, from that pleasure or that moment. Laying on of hands, Genesis 48:1. Blessing and approving a person. And so forth. And it has the book of Exodus, a burning bush, which doesn't literally mean a burning bush. It's difficulties ahead. This is in the Eastern language, the idioms, the mindset, right? And it wasn't consumed, in other words, it didn't burn up. Difficulties will be overcome, the task will be a success. Okay, and it says here, put off those shoes, Exodus 3:5. Disregard pagan teachings, cleanse your heart. Serpent, Exodus 4:3. An enemy, a deception, metaphorically, a pharaoh, a king. This is just saying, here's an example, metaphorically, a pharaoh, an ungodly king, Egyptian king, right? Take that serpent by the tail, basically. Take it by the tail, Exodus 4:4. To overcome it, to defeat it, truth triumphs over error. And so forth. Listen, he comes forth to the water, Exodus 8:20. He goes to the toilet. And so forth. And the pillar of cloud, Exodus 13:21. To lead and to protect from the heat of the day. So if you get those Israelites escaping from the Egyptians, were going through desert, so it was really, really hot. Okay, so there's these clouds above them to keep them cool, etc., protect them from the heat of the day. Because your skin, logically, common sense wise, reality, it can't handle that immense heat. It'll start to blister, it'll burn, or it'll blister, it'll go red, whatever, right? So your skin has to adjust to it, that heat. You can't have it too hot and your skin will blister, etc., etc. That's why European people, when they go out in the sun, they first turn red. Okay, for a couple of days. Yeah. Is that America song? In the desert with a horse of no name, good to be out of the rain. After 3 days, desert sun, my skin began to turn red. So it's got to turn red first. Okay? Blast of thy nostrils, anger, displeasure. Mana, what is it? Aramaic. And so forth. Hornets. This is according to M.Lamsa. Commandos or desert raiders. Hit and run. They saw God, Exodus 24:11. Divine presence felt, so they didn't actually see him. Okay, because if you see God, like Moses basically wrote, or said, right, if you looked upon God, he's too glorious, etc., etc., you would die. Written with the finger of God, Exodus 31:18. Perfect, flawless, without an error. Land flowing with milk and honey, Exodus 33:3. A fertile land, wisdom and spiritual understanding. And Book of Leviticus, Book of Numbers, Book of Deuteronomy, the Book of Joshua and Judges, First Book of Samuel, Second Book of Samuel, and so forth. Create in me a clean heart, Psalms 51:10. Make me to be born again, put out the error in exchange for the truth. Renew a right spirit within me, Psalms 51:10. Grant me right thinking, right inclinations. So these are all the original ancient languages, meanings, Okay, the idioms. A lot of them will be metaphorical, allegorical, not to be taken literal, as literal. This one here, his hand in the sea and his right hand in the rivers. Psalms 89:25. He shall have dominion over the islands and the sea and the lands of the river, namely Egypt and Assyria. Book of Proverbs. The tree of life. Proverbs 11:30. A good family. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life. Proverbs 13:3. They're proverbs. They're positive verbs, right? He who talks less keeps out of trouble and spares his life. A wounded spirit. Proverbs 18:14. Hurt pride. It's when someone steps on your ego because they've exposed you, so you've got that hurt pride. In Ecclesiastes. Songs of Solomon, Song of Solomon, all wisdom there. Then the prophet Isaiah. Flies and bees, Isaiah 7:18. Large armies of the Assyrians and Egyptians. Okay, here it has virgin, Isaiah 7:14. Purity and chastity. So a very holy person, right? Very pure, wholesome, and practicing chastity. They were indulging in intercourse, etc., right? So that would explain Mary, the mother of Christ. She's not the mother of God, she's just the mother of that being, okay? God incarnate in the flesh, but she's not the mother of God, Father God, right? Or anyone divine, because she's human. So there's lots more here that will help all to fully understand what the actual Old Testament and the New Testament are saying, meaning. Okay, I'm going to skip to the New Testament for a moment. Okay, where is the beginning of Matthew? And obviously this is to do with Joseph and Mary. He knew her not, Matthew 1:19. He had not had intercourse with her, and she was a virgin, a girl who has known no man, an unmarried woman. So it's nothing to do with her being a nun or of some sort of sect or anything like that. She was just holy and chaste, right? Didn't do that. Didn't involve herself lay with a man, right? Okay, and here's Matthew 3:16. When the heavens were open, the heavens were receptive of a revelation. Something was revealed to those people. So when John the Baptist baptized Christ, and then the writer says, I saw the Spirit of God descend, and like a dove it sat on his shoulder, and then he heard God's voice. That's a revelation. It's a revealing of the triune Godhead, because God spoke. The Holy Spirit came down as a dove, descended on Christ's shoulder, and he's the Christ there being baptized. And God says, okay, this is my Son in whom I am well pleased. So that's the triune Godhead. So you can't deny that there's a Trinity or a triune Godhead. It's there, okay, in the book of John, and so forth. And these all your Sermon on the Mount, your parables. Blessed is he who is meek, etc. Poor in spirit, poor in pride, humble. Doesn't have a big, huge ego. A very humble person. Pure in heart, pure in mind. Here's another one. If the right eye offend thee, pluck it out. It doesn't mean literally get your finger and pop it out. It doesn't mean that. It means if you have a habit of envying, cut it out or stop it. Cut your hand off. About 5:30. It says stop stealing. It's not literal. Go get an axe and chop it off or whatever, right? Whoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Matthew 5:39. So you're not like the guys that give you a hard time. You go smack. Right. So you go here. You go. Here, how about this one? Yeah. It's saying something completely different. Don't start a quarrel or fight. Be humble. Don't indulge in endless debates about genealogy, etc. in arguments. Let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. Matthew 6:3. Don't advertise your giving. Don't say, hey, people, I'm giving this guy here some food. Yeah, you know, how about putting some money in my pocket or something like that? Look at me. You just do it, okay? In your closet, you know, it says, you know, when you pray, go into your closet, etc., etc. It means, you know, speak. You know, you're not actually verbalizing it. It's all in your mind. You're thinking in your mind, right? Your inner heart or mind, and so forth. In pearls before swine, don't throw your wise sayings before fools that are trample on it, right? And undermine it, etc., etc. And it carries on like that throughout the rest of the book, with Mark and Luke and so forth. Heard us about the probably where they're having the Last Supper, okay? And the Christ says, "Eat my body," Mark 14:22. So it's not saying, you know, here's a chunk of this, fry it up and eat it. It says, "Share my suffering, make my teaching a part of you. Think of me when you celebrate the Passover," in remembrance of when the Israelites were enslaved by the Egyptians, and the spirit of death was coming over these people. They had to put the blood of the lamb on their doorposts, and it would bypass them, okay? Because that's something that they do this Passover forever, right? Because it's in Exodus. They'll do that forever and ever. Drink my blood. And he's not Dracula. He's saying, make my teaching a part of your life. Be willing to suffer for my truth. Think of me when you celebrate the Passover. Yeah? When you eat and drink at that particular get together. Speak with new tongues, Mark 16:17. You will learn foreign languages wherever you go. Okay. Take up a serpent, Mark 16:18. Handle an enemy, overcome opposition. Drink any deadly thing, Mark 16:18. To be able to withstand any attacks against your character. It doesn't mean like these charismatic churches in the southern states, you know, America. Oh, I can get bitten by this snake and I can drink poison or whatever and I'm not going to die. And then they die. Yeah, they got it around the wrong way. Yeah, they haven't understood it fully. But they think, oh yeah, it means I can step on scorpions, I can get bitten by snakes, whatever. I can drink poison and it'll never affect me. Yeah, and they die of like strychnine poisoning or something like that.